Hey everybody, this is AP Macro. This is the 2019 FRQ. This is set 1, question 1. Let's get to it. Number 1, Canada is an open economy, guys. When AP says that, guys, that's just basically the default. It just means there's the rest of the world that Canada is trading with, and financial capital does flow between countries. That's all it means. It's just not a closed economy. Next, it says it's currently in a recessionary gap. Actually says recessionary output gap. Guys, same case, recessionary gap. You can use those phrases interchangeably. So we're in a recession. 1A, draw a correctly labeled graph for the long run aggregate supply curve, short run aggregate supply curve, aggregate demand curve. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I've got my graph up here. I'm going to be answering A and B right in this area. And the first thing I want kids to know is it's always good to title your graph. So ASAD model, always a good idea. Now, let's do the axes. Of course, the vertical is the price level. Sometimes people put aggregate price level. It's perfectly fine to put PL or APL, both work. This is output or real GDP. And then the upward sloping line is, of course, SRAS. The downward sloping line is AD. And here's the thing, guys. I know I have one more curve that I need to draw on here, but I want to make a point. These two curves, where they intersect, that is where we are always at. We're always at the intersection of SRAS and AD. Another way to say it, guys, is we're always on our SRAS and AD. We're not always on that third curve, which is the LRAS. So I'm going to go ahead and put an equilibrium, and I'm going to go ahead and label what they want to from A1. The current equilibrium, real output and price level, they want us to put the output as Y1, okay, perfectly fine, and they want us to put the price level as PL1. In my class, normally when I do things is my original point, I like to put zeros right here, but it doesn't matter what I want. I'm going to do what the AP test is telling me, right? So if they want Y1 and PL1, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make that equilibrium sub 1, and I'm just going to say, hey, that's my original point. All right, so we've got most of it done. We still need that LRAS curve, and we still need to show full employment output to get that A2. So let's go ahead and do that. Our LRAS curve, guys, is vertical, always vertical. Okay, and it is always anchored at full employment output, guys. In the long run, we always return full employment output. So let's go ahead and get it up here. I like to put it in red. Of course, on the test, you use the same color, but this is for teaching purposes. Oh, I guess I should be a little bit clear, right? Our current level of output, as we know, is this amount. If we are in a recession, then we are producing less than our full employment level of output, right? Again, this is our current level of output, that horizontal distance. We're in a recession, so our current level of output is less than our full employment level of output. We're not at full employment. So I'm going to make sure that LRAS curve is to the right of Y1. Doesn't matter how far right I go, so that looks good enough to me. Make sure it's pretty vertical. There we go. Try to make it a little bit darker. All right, let's go ahead and get it labeled LRAS. Remember, y'all, anytime you put a line on the graph, make sure you label it. No matter what, I don't care if it's the first or the second, always label all lines you put on the graph. Again, that LRAS is always anchored at YF. The F stands for full employment, the Y stands for output. Full employment output, and now you can see that recessionary gap or recessionary output gap, whichever term you like more, and it's this distance right here, guys. That is our recessionary output gap. All right. That closes off A. Let's go to B. The central bank and the government do not take any policy action. Okay, so there's basically two major intervention policies for macroeconomics, right? There's monetary policy and there's fiscal policy. The central bank controls monetary policy, government controls fiscal policy. They're saying that these two actors are not going to act. That means we're not going to intervene. If we're not going to intervene, we're going to let the long run take place, and that's where this problem is going. So we're not going to use fiscal policy or monetary policy. So B1, explain how the economy will adjust to full employment in the long run. Remember, we're here. What's going to happen in the long run? Well, the first thing is we have to define the long run. The long run is when nominal wages are fully adjusted to changes in the price level. In fact, you can kind of shorten it. It's fine to just say, hey, it's when nominal wages have changed, right? Of course, the longer definition of the long run is when nominal wages have fully adjusted to changes in the price level. But guys, the big thing is we're waiting for nominal wages to change. Over here, we're in this short run equilibrium. For us to get back to the LRAS curve, nominal wages have to change. And what will they do if we are on the left-hand side of the LRAS? And guys, I want to be clear. I don't care how we get to the left-hand side. If we are on the left-hand side of the LRAS, what are we wages going to do? They're going to go down. Every time, 100% of the time. We're on the left-hand side. If we let the long run happen, wages are going down. And why is that? Because we have cyclically unemployed people, guys. We have basically a surplus of available workers. So what's going to happen to the price of labor, i.e. wages? They're going to go down. We're waiting for cyclical unemployment people to accept a lower wage. Now, of course, the lower wage, or the wage, is a cost of production. And so when wages go down, that's a cost of production going down, and our total production line, the SRAS, is going to shift. And which way is it going to shift? To the right. We're actually going to get more production at all levels, at all price level, at all the different price levels, because wages have gone down. When the cost of production goes down, we'll get more production at all price levels. So we want to shift that SRAS to the right. I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. It's going to shift all the way until we are now intersecting the LRS and the AD, right? Of course, we're always at the SRAS and AD intersection. I got to get that intersection point on the LRAS. Basically, I need all three curves to intersect. E sub 2, SRAS sub 2. I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 and a 1. And that is what's going to happen in the long run. From E1 to E2, it doesn't ask this, but the price level went down and real GDP increased. So, explain how the economy will adjust to full employment in the long run. So, B1. I've basically already done it. Let's just do it one more time. Here's kind of the maybe a little bit shorter way to do it. If we're in a recession, nominal wages are going to go down. When nominal wages go down, the SRAS curve is going to shift right until it intersects the LRAS and AD at full employment output. That would be acceptable, okay? I gave you a longer explanation before, which would also work. The shorter one, I'm sure, would work. B2, on your graph in part A, show how the economy adjusts to full employment in the long run. Okay, that all they're doing is saying, hey, show that adjustment. We've already done it, so we've got B2. Moving on to C. I'm going to answer it over here. Suppose the Canadian government is unwilling to wait for the long run. Okay, they're changing things. Okay, now we're unwilling to wait for the long run. We're going to intervene. The marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. Already got that on the board. The equilibrium output, okay, so they want the equilibrium real output. Of course, that's where SRAS and AD are intersecting. I want to get rid of some distractions, guys. That SRAS, that shifted because we waited on the long run. Remember, we're not waiting on the long run anymore, so I want to get rid of that. So again, SRAS and AD, when they intersect, that's where we're actually at. So I'm going to put 500 billion right there. And then it says full employment output is 540 billion. So full employment output, 540 billion. So there it is. That gap is $40 billion. Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff up there. C1, calculate the minimum change and indicate the direction of the change in government spending required to shift the AD curve by the amount of the output gap. Okay, so they're already kind of telling us some stuff. We got to shift the AD curve by the amount of the output gap. Now, technically, we have to do more than that. And what I'm really hinting at is why they threw the word minimum in here. So follow with me for just a second, okay? They're already telling you we need to shift the AD by the amount of the output gap. Again, that output gap is $40 billion, right? So we need to shift that curve by 40 billion, that direction, right, by $40 million. Now, technically, the way that we drew this graph, the way that I had this graph drawn, go ahead and put that new AD curve in right there. Take a look at that. That would actually not do the trick. It would not get us back to full employment level of output. Why is that? Look at the SRAS and AD. My new AD and the original SRAS are now actually intersecting there. That would not be enough to get us back to 540, and hence why they threw the word minimum in there. See, that distance, that 40 billion that we need to shift AD in total, can be enough if our SRAS curve has a different shape. So let me get rid of this SRAS curve. Let me show you a shape that 40 billion would be enough. All right, so if the SRAS was a flat, straight line, a horizontal line, right? So here's my SRAS. It was a horizontal line. That was my original intersection. That's my new intersection. Now, AD only needs to shift by 40 billion. Here's the thing, guys. AP test is going to throw that word minimum out there all the time because they're never going to make you figure out how much you have to shift AD if SRAS is upward sloping because they don't want you to do that type of math, okay? So they're always going to throw the word minimum out there. So when does AD only have to shift by a minimum of the output gap, again, which was 40 billion, if SRAS is horizontal? That's all that's going on there. So let's answer the question. It's actually not a very hard question, right? We know we need total spending. That's what AD is, guys. AD is total spending. We need total spending to increase by 40 billion. They're saying, what's our initial change in government spending that we're going to need to get that accomplished? Here's the idea. The MPC is 0.8. That definitely tells us that the MPS is 0.2, right? Because the MPC plus the MPS gives us 1. These two added together equal 1 always, 100% of the time. Now, we want to use this thing called the spending multiplier. The spending multiplier, some people know it as 1 over 1 minus the MPC. I personally really like 1 over the MPS, okay? Remember, 1 minus the MPC is the MPS. They're one and the same. So 1 over the MPS, what does that give us? That gives us 1 over 0.2. 0.2 goes into 1 5 times. That's going to give us a simple spending multiplier or spending multiplier of 5. Here's what I tell my students, guys. That 5 is really a ratio. I think it's best to go ahead and put that 5 over 1. Now don't be confused here, guys. That's still 5, right? 5 over 1 is 5. But here's why I say it's a ratio, okay? So 5 over 1. What it's saying is this. For every initial change in spending of $1, we will get a total change in spending of $5, okay? So when we change, for every initial change in spending of $1, we get a total change in spending of $5. How much do we need AD to shift by? 40 billion. It tells us that, guys. It straight up tells us 40 billion is how much we want AD to shift by. So our total change in spending, we want to be 40 billion. So I'm going to put that on top, right? Initial change in spending, total change in spending. So what's our initial change in government spending? That's our X. We just need to solve for X. So of course, multiply both sides by X. You have 5X equals 40. Divide both sides by 5. Our answer is $8 billion. We need $8 billion to go from the government into the product market initially, and then allow the spending multiplier, the circular flow, and the spending multiplier to take place to get a total change in spending of 40 billion. I know that was a lot, but that's the answer to C1. Calculate the minimum change and indicate the direction. Make sure you do both. So we're going to say government spending needs to increase. That's what they mean by a direction of $8 billion to close that gap. All right. Next, calculate the minimum change and indicate the direction of the change in taxes required to shift the aggregate demand curve by the amount of the output gap. Again, the output gap, $40 billion, right? We know that. We need AD to go 40 billion. But this is a tax change. This is going to be a little bit different. Now, there is a thing called a tax multiplier out there. And guys, I'll do that at the very end. I don't love the tax multiplier. I think the spending multiplier is perfectly fine. I can use that to figure this out. Here's what I'm saying, guys. I know my initial change in spending I need is 8 billion. Remember, that's what this X was, right? If I get an initial change in spending of 8 billion, I will get a total change in spending of 40 billion. 8 times that 5 is my 40 billion, right? So, I need consumption to change by $8 billion. I need that consumption to change by $8 billion. I'm doing a tax change, right? This is fiscal policy. I'm going to do a tax change to get consumption to change by 8 billion. Here's the idea. What am I going to do to taxes? I'm in a recession. I'm definitely going to decrease taxes. And by the way, they say in what direction. So let me go ahead and get that part of the answer up here. It's going to be a decrease in taxes. Go ahead and take care of that right off the bat. I decrease my taxes. My disposable income will actually go up by the same exact amount as I decrease taxes, right? Hopefully that makes sense, right? I've got this income flowing in. That's technically personal income right there, but income flowing in. If I take less taxes, disposable income is going to increase. But here's the key, guys. I can't just take the increase in disposable income, which is equal to the decrease in taxes, and take it against my multiplier. Because some of that disposable income is going to go to savings, right? See that NPS right there? Some of it's going to go to savings, only some of it's going to make it here. How much do I need to make it here? $8 billion. So here's the idea, guys. I need a change in disposable income times what? So I need my DI to change by what to get my spending, my consumption to change by $8 billion times my MPC, right? Take my disposable income change, multiply it times my MPC, and that will give me a consumption change, which is spending, right, of $8 billion. $8 billion. So, we know the MPC. What's the MPC? 0.8, right? They gave us that. So guys, it's not very hard. All we got to do is find out what that is, because that change in disposable income is the change in taxes I need. Well, if you solve that, remember, you can just put an X if you feel better about it, right? You just solve that, that's $10 billion. We need to lower taxes by $10 billion. If we lower taxes by $10 billion, disposable income will increase by $10 billion. When disposable income increases by $10 billion, $2 billion, 0.2, will go to savings. 0.8 of that, $8 billion will make it here. Our initial change in spending will be $8 billion. And guys, that's what we need. The initial change in spending of $8 billion to get a $40 billion total change in spending. Now I told you I'd use that doggone thing called the tax multiplier. I don't love it, but we've got our answer up here, so let me just create a little bit of space. Alright? Tax multiplier, I just think it's like another formula you have to memorize. So here is what it is. Negative MPC over, okay, negative MPC over MPS. So what was MPC? It was 0.8 negative over 0.2. Okay, so negative 0.8 over 0.2 gives us a negative 4. Okay, so the negative, all right, is basically going to help remind me that we need to lower taxes, right? So how much do we need taxes to change by to get a 40 billion? Remember the output gap, 40 billion. There it is, there's my multiplier. So what would be the answer? Again, 10 billion, right? Take my multiplier times 10 billion, gives me 40 billion. So that's what we need to do, lower taxes by 10 billion, which we already knew. However you want to solve, it's fine. I don't love memorizing formulas. I think you just have a spending multiplier, you can handle those tax and even transfer payment changes also. All right, moving on. Heading over to D now. Assume instead that the Canadian Central Bank takes action. Okay, so now we're not going to do fiscal policy, but we're still going to intervene, now with monetary policy, to restore the economy to full employment output by influencing investment spending. Of course, that's what monetary policy mainly does. It changes the money supply, which changes the interest rate, which changes investment spending. We need to know that. That's a 10 out of 10 on an AP test, right? Like as far as what we need to know. Monetary policy changes the interest rate, which is targeting mainly investment spending. Okay, so influencing investment spending, draw a correctly labeled graph of the money market, okay, and show the effect of the actions taken by the central bank on the equilibrium interest rate. All right, not a big deal. Okay, that's a lot of words. To just say draw a money market and show what the central bank's actions would do. So here I am, get that, title it right. We're always going to title what is the vertical axis. Well, that's the nominal interest rate. Quantity of money. I personally like to put quantity of M1, but M1 and money are the same thing. Key thing here, guys, the money supply curve is always vertical. The money supply curve always vertical. I like to draw my money demand curve kind of with this little kink right here showing the difference between transaction demand for money and asset demand for money, the idea that we're adding those two together. You do not have to do that kink. You can just draw downward sloping. Perfectly fine to just do it downward sloping. But anyhow, that's what we've got. The Fed is acting. The Fed controls the money supply. We're in a recession. What are they going to do, the money supply guys? Straightforward. They're going to increase it, right? So we're just going to show an increase in the money supply, and then we're just going to be really sure that we show the change in the nominal interest rate, because they said show the change in the nominal interest rate. So our original equilibrium, we're going to bring that over. I'm going to put my interest rate sub 0. I'll bring it over again, interest rate sub 1. I'm going to put a big old arrow to make sure they know what I did, that the interest rate is going down, and that is what easy monetary policy does, right? You increase the money supply, the price of money is going to go down. What's the price of money? It's the nominal interest rate. And you're doing that mainly to affect investment. Of course, you're also going to affect net exports and consumption, but that's not this problem, at least not right now. All right, so that's all you had to do to get that point. 1E, we're almost there. All right, so I got my Canadian market right here, my CAD market, Canadian dollar market. I know we're going to need it. Canada and Mexico are trading partners. Remember, open economy, right? Draw a correctly labeled graph of the foreign exchange market of the Canadian dollar. That's what I started right here. I'll finish it out in a second. And show the effect of the change in the interest rate. In Part D, we know what happened to the interest rate. It went down on the value of the Canadian dollar with respect to the Mexican peso. All right, so basically, this is how it goes. I got my Canadian dollar market. So what I'm going to put is I'm going to put the peso over 1 CAD, okay? That's my axis right there. That's the price of the CAD. How many pesos do we need to get 1 CAD? That's the price of the CAD, right? If this is a CAD market, remember, CAD just means Canadian dollar market, right? So Canadian dollar market, the price of 1 Canadian dollar is the amount of pesos. In fact, it's actually good to even put the S in, right? The amount of pesos we need to get 1 CAD is the price of the Canadian dollar. Now I'm going to say supply, Canadian dollar, demand, Canadian dollar, quantity of Canadian dollar. Okay, nothing big there, right? This is the Canadian dollar market. We have the supply of Canadian dollar, demand for Canadian dollar, quantity of Canadian dollar, and how many pesos we need to get 1 Canadian dollar, which is the price of the Canadian dollar. It is now labeled correctly. I now need to just handle that interest rate change. Here's what's going on. In Canada, by the way, this little thing right, this green line right here, that's the border of Canada, if you will, conceptually speaking. All right, so conceptually speaking, at the border of Canada, what's happening in their financial market is the interest rate is going down, okay? Ceteris paribus, no change in the interest rate over here, so we've got an interest rate change here. This is Mexico. Which way is the money going to flow? Well, people want to get the highest return possible, so money is going to start flowing from Canada abroad, okay? And by the way, people in Mexico who may have been bringing their financial capital over are going to go do a little U-turn. They're not going to bring as much, which tells us how to shift these curves. And I'm going to shift both because, guys, both the suppliers of the Canadian dollar and the demanders of the Canadian dollar are going to respond. AP is only going to require you to shift one curve, great, but both are going to respond, so I'm going to show you what would happen to both. So suppliers of Canadian dollars, we think of those as Canadians, right? And remember, they have a lower interest rate here. Hey, I want to go put more of my financial capital abroad because I'm getting a lower return here. So I'm going to supply my Canadian dollars. Supply of the Canadian dollar is going to shift to the right? Put my sub-0, sub-1. Remember, people from Mexico, they're going to want to put their money here less because, remember, the interest rate's gone down. You get a lower return here on your money. So they're going to keep their money in Mexico. Therefore, they're going to supply less pesos, i.e. demand less Canadian dollars, right? They're going to supply less of their currency, which means they're demanding less of the Canadian dollar. Canadian dollar is going to shift to the left. Demand Canadian dollar. What's going to happen? We're going to show it right here because this is the vertical axis shows appreciation or depreciation. Hey, that Canadian dollar is depreciating. Woo! 2019 FRQ set 1, question 1, answered and somewhat explained. Hope it made sense to you. We'll see you in the next video.